Richard Ashford kneels at his wife Catherine's grave on a freezing December morning, placing white roses on the marble headstone. As he turns to leave, he hears small voices singing, "You Are My Sunshine" behind him. Two tiny black girls in threadbare coats stand at Catherine's grave, their hands pressed against the cold stone. They look up at him with tears streaming down their faces. "Are you Mama Catherine's husband?" one whispers. Richard freezes. The other girl adds, "Mama Catherine said if anything bad happened, we should find you here." Richard stands motionless, his mind struggling to process what he just heard. The cold December wind cuts through his expensive wool coat, but he barely notices. These two little girls, no older than 6 or 7, are looking at him with a mixture of hope and fear that makes his chest tighten. "Who are you?" he finally manages to ask, his voice rougher than intended. The girls flinch slightly, and he watches them instinctively move closer to each other, their small hands clasping together. "I'm Destiny," the slightly taller one says, her voice barely above a whisper. "And this is my sister Hope. We're twins. Mama Catherine was our friend. She took care of us." Richard feels the world tilting slightly. Catherine never mentioned any children. In 28 years of marriage, his wife had never kept secrets from him, or so he thought. "How did you know my wife?" he demands, trying to keep his tone gentle but failing. The desperation in his voice makes both girls take a step back. Destiny reaches into a tattered plastic bag she's carrying and pulls out a worn photograph, protected in a Ziploc bag. She hands it to Richard with trembling fingers. He takes it, his hands shaking as he examines the image. It's Catherine, smiling broadly, her arms around these same two girls. They're standing in what looks like a soup kitchen or community center. Catherine is wearing the lavender sweater he gave her last Christmas. This photo is recent, maybe 6 months old, taken before the cancer got really bad. But Catherine never said a word about these children. "We've been sleeping in the cemetery for 3 weeks, Hope says suddenly, her voice small and frightened. "Ever since the bad people took us from the shelter, we didn't know where else to go. Then Destiny remembered what Mama Catherine said about finding you here if we ever needed help." Richard looks at them more closely now. Their coats are thin and dirty, more suitable for autumn than this bitter Boston winter. Their shoes have holes in them. Both girls are shivering violently, their lips tinged blue, but what strikes him most are their eyes, old beyond their years, filled with a wariness that no child should possess. "Tell me everything," Richard says, crouching down to their level. "How did you know Catherine?" The girls exchange glances, some silent communication passing between them. "Mama Catherine came to the Mercy Street Community Center every Tuesday and Thursday," Destiny explains. "She brought us food and clothes. She helped us with homework. She smelled like lavender and always hummed when she was cooking." Hope adds eagerly she had a scar on her left wrist from when she fell off a bike as a little girl. "She told us about it, and she made the best grilled cheese sandwiches with tomato soup." Richard's breath catches. That scar, that habit of humming, Catherine's signature comfort meal, these details are too specific, too intimate for strangers to know. "She talked about you," Destiny continues. "She said you were the kindest man she ever met, but that you'd forgotten how to see people who were invisible. She said maybe one day you'd remember." The words hit Richard like a physical blow. Is that what Catherine thought of him? That he'd become blind to suffering? "Where are your parents?" Richard asks, though he already suspects the answer from their situation. "Our mama died 4 months ago," Hope says, tears spilling down her cheeks. "She got sick, and there was no money for doctors. Mama Catherine was helping us, but then she got sick too. The social workers came and tried to put us in different foster homes, but we ran away because they were going to separate us. We have to stay together. We promised Mama." Richard's mind is racing. Catherine was dying of cancer during those final months, and she was still trying to save these children. Why didn't she tell him? Why didn't she ask for his help? The cold is becoming unbearable, and both girls are shaking uncontrollably now. Despite his confusion, his suspicion, his sense of betrayal at Catherine's secrecy, Richard cannot leave 2 6-year-old children in a cemetery in December. "Come with me," he says, standing up. "Let's get you warm and fed, and then we'll figure this out." The girls don't move immediately. "Are you going to send us away?" Destiny asks. Will you separate us? Richard looks at these two tiny, terrified children and makes a decision that will change everything. I'm not going to separate you, he promises, and I'm not sending you anywhere until we sort this out. Now come on before you both catch pneumonia. He leads them to his Mercedes, parked at the cemetery entrance. The girls stare at the car as if it's a spaceship. Hope whispers to her sister, "Is this real?" Destiny doesn't answer, just clutches her sister's hand tighter. The drive to Richard's Beacon Hill mansion is quiet. The girls sit pressed together in the back seat, their eyes wide as they take in the leather interior, the heated seats, the soft music playing from hidden speakers. Richard watches them in the rearview mirror, trying to reconcile what he's seeing with the life he thought he knew. Catherine kept this secret for how long? Months? Years? He pulls out his phone and calls his assistant, Patricia, asking her to bring children's clothing, size 6 or 7, and food suitable for young children. Immediately, he adds, his tone brooking no argument. Patricia's confusion is evident in her voice, but she agrees. When they arrive at the mansion, the girls freeze on the front steps. The house is a historic brownstone worth $12 million, with marble columns and a grand entrance that has intimidated many adults. For two homeless 6-year-olds, it must seem like a castle. Come inside, Richard urges gently. They step into the foyer, and he watches their reaction to the chandelier, the sweeping staircase, the artwork on the walls. They stand perfectly still, as if afraid to breathe. You can sit down, Richard says, gesturing to the plush furniture in the sitting room. Both girls shake their heads. We're too dirty, Destiny says quietly. We'll ruin your nice things. The statement breaks something in Richard's chest. Sit, he repeats, more firmly this time. The furniture can be cleaned. You need to rest. Reluctantly, they perch on the edge of a sofa, their backs straight, ready to bolt at any moment. Richard goes to the kitchen and returns with hot chocolate and sandwiches. He sets the food on the coffee table, and the way both girls' eyes lock onto it tells him everything he needs to know about how long it's been since they ate properly. Go ahead, he says. They don't need to be told twice. They eat with desperate efficiency, trying to maintain manners but unable to hide their hunger. As they eat, Richard notices the scars. There are marks on Destiny's arms, old bruises on Hope's neck in various stages of healing, a burn mark on Destiny's hand. What happened to you? He asks carefully. The girls stop eating. They look at each other again, that twin communication. Finally, Destiny speaks. The last shelter we were in, some of the people there didn't like us. They said mean things about our skin. They said we were taking resources from people who deserved them more. One man burned Destiny with his cigarette, Hope adds, her voice shaking. He said we needed to learn our place. The adults in charge didn't do anything, so we left. Richard feels rage building in his chest, hot and consuming. These children have been abused, neglected, left to survive on their own, and all because of the color of their skin combined with their vulnerability. Patricia arrives with bags of clothing and groceries. She takes one look at the girls and her expression changes. Richard sees it, the slight tightening around her eyes, the way her smile becomes forced. I brought what you asked for, she says coolly, though I have to say, Mr. Ashford, bringing strangers into your home like this, especially children, is quite unusual. There are proper channels for this sort of thing. These aren't strangers, Richard says, surprising himself with the protectiveness in his voice. They knew Catherine. Patricia's eyebrows rise, but she says nothing more. After she leaves, Richard shows the girls to a guest room. There's a private bathroom here, he explains. You can take warm showers and put on clean clothes. I'll be right downstairs if you need anything. The girls nod, still silent and watchful. He leaves them, closing the door gently, and heads to Catherine's study. Richard stands in Catherine's study for a long moment before moving. The room still smells faintly of her perfume, and everything is exactly as she left it. He hasn't been able to bring himself to change anything in the 8 months since her death. But now he needs answers. He starts with her desk, methodically going through drawers. Most contain the expected items: bills, correspondence, photographs of their life together. But then he notices something he'd never paid attention to before, a small drawer at the bottom of the desk that appears decorative but has a tiny keyhole. Richard searches for a key, finally finding it taped to the underside of the desk. His hands shake as he unlocks the drawer. Inside are journals, at least a dozen of them, spanning several years. There are also receipts, photographs, and legal documents. Richard pulls out the most recent journal and begins to read. Catherine's familiar handwriting fills the pages with entries about her work at Mercy Street Community Center, a place in Roxbury that Richard vaguely knows exists but has never visited. She writes about the families she meets, mostly Black and Hispanic, struggling with homelessness, addiction, medical debt, systemic poverty. Her compassion pours from every page, but so does her growing frustration with a system designed to keep people down. Then he finds the entries about destiny and hope. Met the Carter family today, Catherine wrote 2 years ago. Angela is a nurse who lost her job after reporting patient abuse. She's been blacklisted throughout the healthcare industry and can't find work. She has twin daughters, 6 years old, who are the brightest, sweetest children I've ever met. They're living in their car. I gave them money for a motel, but it's not enough. I need to do more. The entries continue, chronicling Catherine's deepening relationship with Angela and the girls. She paid for their temporary housing, bought them clothes and food, helped Angela apply for jobs that never materialized. Angela tried to report patient abuse at Greenvale Nursing Home, owned by Titan Healthcare Corporation, Catherine wrote 6 months later. She documented elderly Black patients being oversedated, neglected, and defrauded. When she reported it, Titan destroyed her career. No one will hire her. She's been blacklisted everywhere. This is systematic retaliation, and it's legal because she can't afford lawyers to fight it. Richard feels sick reading this. He continues through the journals, watching his wife's heartbreak grow as Angela's situation worsened. 4 months ago, the entry that changes everything. Angela died last night, pneumonia. It was treatable, but she had no insurance, no money, no access to care. She died of a disease we could have cured with $50 worth of antibiotics. The girls were with her. They held her hands as she died in a free clinic waiting room. I promised Angela I would take care of them. I've started the foster care paperwork, but my cancer is progressing faster than the doctors predicted. I don't know if I have enough time. Richard, if you're reading this, you need to know. The girls need you. The final entry is dated 2 weeks before Catherine died. Richard reads it through tears. I'm running out of time. The foster care system is broken, and I'm afraid of what will happen to Destiny and Hope. They've been through so much trauma already. I've made arrangements, but I wish I could tell Richard everything. He's a good man, but he's been asleep for so long, insulated by wealth from the reality most people face. Maybe the girls will wake him up the way they woke me up. I pray he finds them. I pray he sees them. I pray he remembers who he used to be before money and power made him comfortable with other people's suffering. Richard closes the journal, his face wet with tears. Catherine thought he was complicit in suffering through his indifference. Was she right? He looks at the bank statements in the drawer. Catherine withdrew nearly $200,000 over 3 years for charitable expenses. He never noticed because he let his accountants handle everything. He never asked questions. He trusted Catherine to manage household finances while he focused on building his empire. What else did he miss? Richard pulls out his phone and calls Kenneth Morrison, his business partner and childhood friend. They've known each other for 40 years, built Ashford Enterprises together from nothing. If anyone knew about Catherine's activities, it would be Kenneth. Ken, Richard says when his friend answers. Did you know about Catherine's charity work? There's a long pause. Rich, Kenneth says carefully, we need to talk about this in person. You knew, Richard says, his voice hardening. You knew what she was doing, and you never told me. It wasn't my place, Kenneth replies. Catherine asked me to help her set up an anonymous foundation to protect you from liability. She was helping people who had legal issues, employment disputes, housing problems. She didn't want any of it traced back to you or the company. You advised her to hide this from me, Richard says, disbelief and anger mixing in his voice. I advised her that if you knew she was helping people who were suing or fighting major corporations, you'd shut it down as a business liability, Kenneth says bluntly. And I was right, wasn't I? Would you have let her continue if you knew? Richard wants to deny it, but he can't. A year ago, even 6 months ago, he probably would have stopped Catherine, citing legal exposure and reputational risk. The realization is crushing. We need to meet tomorrow, Kenneth continues. There are complications with this situation that you need to understand before you make any decisions about these children. What complications? Richard demands. Tomorrow, Kenneth repeats. Trust me, Rich. This is bigger than you realize. He hangs up. Richard sits in Catherine's study, surrounded by evidence of his wife's secret life, and feels like he's meeting her for the first time. She was heroic, brilliant, compassionate, everything he thought he knew but at a depth he never imagined. And she didn't trust him enough to share it. That night, Richard checks on the girls. They've showered and changed into the new clothes. They're sitting together on the bed, looking at a photo album they found in the room, images of Catherine at various ages. When Richard enters, they both look up guiltily. Sorry, Destiny says quickly. We didn't mean to snoop. It's okay, Richard assures them. You can look at anything you want. He sits in the chair by the bed. Can't sleep, he asks. Hope shakes her head. We keep thinking this is a dream, that we'll wake up back in the cemetery. This isn't a dream, Richard says. You're safe here. For how long? Destiny asks. The question is far too adult for a 6-year-old. Richard doesn't have an answer. Destiny suddenly starts crying, then screaming. She's having a nightmare, thrashing in the bed. Hope tries to wake her, but Destiny is lost in whatever horror her mind is replaying. Richard moves to the bed instinctively and gently touches her shoulder. Destiny, wake up. You're safe. You're safe. She wakes with a gasp, disoriented and terrified. Then she sees Richard and bursts into tears. I dreamed Mama was calling for us, but we couldn't reach her, she sobs. Richard does something he hasn't done since his own children were small. He pulls her into his arms and holds her while she cries. Hope joins them, and Richard finds himself holding both girls while they weep for their mother, for Catherine, for everything they've lost. Something in his chest, frozen for years, begins to crack open. When they finally calm down, Destiny looks up at him with red, swollen eyes. Thank you, Mr. Richard, she whispers. He tucks them both into bed, and Hope reaches out and takes his hand. Can you stay until we fall asleep? She asks. We're scared of the dark. Richard pulls the chair closer to the bed and sits, still holding Hope's hand. I'll stay, he promises. I'll stay as long as you need. Richard wakes in the chair beside the girl's bed, his neck stiff and his back aching. Weak morning light filters through the curtains. Destiny and Hope are still asleep, curled together like puppies, their faces peaceful for the first time since he met them. He carefully extracts his hand from Hope's grip and heads downstairs to make breakfast. He's standing at the stove, attempting to recreate Catherine's famous pancakes, when his sister Victoria lets herself in through the front door. She has a key, a fact Richard suddenly resents. Rich, she calls out, we need to talk about what happened at the cemetery yesterday. Patricia called me. She's concerned about your judgment. Richard meets her in the hallway, blocking her path to the kitchen. This isn't a good time, Victoria, he says. His sister, 50 years old and every inch the Boston socialite, looks past him toward the stairs. Are they here? She asks. The homeless children Patricia mentioned. They have names, Richard says coldly. Destiny and Hope. And yes, they're sleeping upstairs. Victoria's expression shifts from curiosity to horror. You brought them here, she hisses. You brought 2 random homeless children into your home without any vetting, without any background checks. They knew Catherine, Richard says. They were close to her. Victoria's laugh is sharp and bitter. Oh, Rich, don't be naive. People prey on wealthy, grieving widowers. These children, or whoever is using them, saw an opportunity. You're being scammed. Richard feels anger rising. You don't know what you're talking about. I have proof they knew Catherine. I've seen her journals. She was helping their mother before she died. And that's another red flag, Victoria snaps. Why would Catherine keep this secret from you? Because she knew I wouldn't understand, Richard admits. She knew I'd see it as a liability, instead of the right thing to do. And she was right. Victoria's face softened slightly. Rich, I know you're grieving. I know you miss her. But taking in 2 children, especially black children from who knows what kind of background, it's not the answer. The racism in her words is subtle, but unmistakable. Richard feels something shift inside him. What exactly do you mean by that? He asks quietly. Victoria has the grace to look uncomfortable. I mean, they come from a completely different world. They have needs and issues you're not equipped to handle. They belong with their own kind, in a system designed for situations like this. Foster care exists for a reason. Richard stares at his sister and sees a stranger. When did you become this person? He asks. When did compassion become something you could dismiss based on someone's race? I'm being realistic, Victoria protests. I'm trying to protect you. From what? Richard demands. From doing something good. From honoring my wife's wishes. From helping 2 children who have no one. This is about more than charity, Victoria says, her voice taking on a harder edge. This is about the Ashford family reputation. Do you have any idea how this looks? A wealthy white man taking in 2 young black girls. People will talk. Let them, Richard says. At that moment, Kenneth arrives. Richard didn't invite him, but Victoria clearly did. They planned this intervention. Kenneth looks uncomfortable but determined. Rich, we need to discuss the practical implications of this situation, he begins. I've been doing some research on the Carter family. The mother, Angela Carter, was involved in a legal dispute with Titan Healthcare Corporation. The implications of that are significant. What implications? Richard asks, though he's starting to understand. Ashford Enterprises holds a 15% stake in Titan Healthcare, Kenneth says quietly. It's worth approximately $40 million. If you publicly take in Angela Carter's children and start asking questions about her case, it could expose corporate wrongdoing. The value of that investment could collapse. You could lose tens of millions. Richard feels the floor dropping out from under him. His money is connected to the company that destroyed these children's lives. Catherine knew, Kenneth continues. That's why she kept her charity work secret. She was horrified when she found out about the Titan connection, but she knew if she told you, you'd have to choose between the children and the business. So she tried to handle it herself. Victoria steps forward, her voice gentler now. Rich, we're not saying abandon them completely. Kenneth has already researched several excellent foster families. White families, well-educated, wealthy. They could provide these girls with opportunities and stability. We could set up a trust fund, make sure they're taken care of financially. You could visit them, maintain a relationship. Everyone wins. The girls go to a proper home, you protect your business interests, and the family name stays intact. Richard looks at his sister and his best friend, people he's known his entire life, and realizes they don't understand anything. Before he can respond, he hears a small sound behind him. He turns to find Destiny standing in the hallway, still in her pajamas. She's heard everything. The look on her face, betrayal, resignation, grief, guts him. Destiny doesn't say anything. She just turns and runs back upstairs. Richard hears her crying to her sister, telling Hope they need to pack their things, that they're being sent away again. Richard makes a decision in that moment, one that will cost him everything but might save his soul. The girls are staying, he says to Victoria and Kenneth. I'm starting the process to become their foster parent, and if that goes well, I'll adopt them. You can't be serious, Victoria gasps. Rich, think about what you're risking, Kenneth urges. $40 million. Your reputation. The company. I've thought about it, Richard says. I've thought about how my money, my investments, my comfortable life is built on a system that destroyed a good woman and left her children homeless. I've thought about what Catherine would want. What she died trying to make me understand. The answer is clear. Victoria's face hardens. If you do this, you're on your own. The family won't support you. I'll make sure of that. Then I guess I'm on my own, Richard says. Kenneth tries once more. Rich, please. Let me at least introduce you to the foster family I found. They're good people. White, connected. They can give these girls everything. The racist presumption that white families are inherently better, that the girls need to be raised by people who look like Richard instead of people who look like them, is the final straw. "Get out," Richard says quietly. "Both of you. This is my home, and you're not welcome here anymore." Victoria leaves in a fury, slamming the door behind her. Kenneth lingers, his expression pained. "You're making a mistake," he says. "Maybe," Richard replies. "But it's my mistake to make." After they leave, Richard goes upstairs and finds both girls sitting on the bed, their few possessions packed into the plastic bags they arrived with. "We're ready," Destiny says, her voice flat. "We know you're going to send us away. Everyone does." Richard kneels in front of them. "I'm not sending you anywhere," he says. "You're staying here with me." Hope looks at him with desperate hope she's afraid to believe in. "But that lady said we don't belong here." "That lady was wrong," Richard says firmly. "And she's not welcome in this house anymore. You belong here because I say you belong here. Because Catherine wanted you here. Because this is your home now if you want it to be." "Do you mean it?" Destiny asks, tears streaming down her face. "I mean it," Richard promises. He calls his lawyer, Donald Pierce, a man he's known for 20 years. "Don, I need you to start emergency foster care proceedings for 2 children. I want to be certified as quickly as possible." There's a pause. "Richard," Donald says carefully, "that process typically takes months. There are home studies, background checks, training requirements." "I understand," Richard says, "but I have resources. Use them. Make this happen as fast as legally possible." Donald agrees, though he sounds concerned. Richard also calls the admissions office at Whitman Academy, the prestigious private school his own children attended. He explains the situation and requests an appointment to enroll Destiny and Hope. The admissions director, Helen Crawford, is warm on the phone. She agrees to meet them that afternoon. Richard thinks this might actually work. He's wrong. Richard, Destiny, and Hope arrive at Whitman Academy that afternoon, dressed in their best clothes. The school is a beautiful historic building in Cambridge, with ivy-covered walls and manicured grounds. It's the kind of place that screams privilege and old money. Helen Crawford greets them warmly in her office, shaking Richard's hand with enthusiasm. "Mr. Ashford, such a pleasure. We've missed having an Ashford child at Whitman." Her smile is genuine until she looks down at Destiny and Hope. Something shifts in her expression, subtle but unmistakable. The warmth doesn't disappear entirely, but it cools several degrees. "And these must be the children you mentioned on the phone," she says, her voice now professionally polite rather than genuinely welcoming. Richard notices the change, but presses forward. "Yes, Destiny and Hope Carter. They're incredibly bright, advanced readers, excellent at mathematics. I'd like to enroll them for the spring semester." Helen sits behind her desk, and her body language has completely changed. She's no longer leaning forward eagerly, but sitting back, creating distance. "Mr. Ashford," she begins, "I'm afraid I wasn't entirely clear on your relationship to these children when we spoke. I assumed they were relatives. They are family," Richard says firmly. "I'm in the process of becoming their legal guardian." Helen's smile tightens. "I see. Well, that's wonderful. However, I'm afraid we have some complications. Our spring semester enrollment is actually quite full at the moment. We have a waiting list. Your own children attended here without any waiting list issues," Richard points out. "Surely there's space for 2 students." Helen shifts uncomfortably. "The situation is complicated, Mr. Ashford. Whitman Academy has a very specific educational philosophy. We cater to children from stable, traditional backgrounds. Given that these girls have experienced homelessness and likely trauma, I'm not sure our environment would be the best fit for their needs. Perhaps a public school with more resources for at-risk students would be more appropriate." Richard feels anger building. "At-risk students," he repeats. "They're 6 years old. They're brilliant and kind. The only risk they face is being judged by people who can't see past the color of their skin." "Mr. Ashford," Helen says, her voice hardening, "I resent that implication. This has nothing to do with race. It's about fit, about ensuring every student receives the appropriate level of support." Our teachers aren't trained to deal with the behavioral issues that often come from difficult backgrounds. Richard stands up. "Come on, girls," he says. "We're leaving." As they walk out, he hears Helen call after him. "There are excellent public schools in Boston, Mr. Ashford. I'm sure you'll find something suitable." In the car, Hope asks quietly, "Why didn't she like us?" Richard grips the steering wheel hard enough that his knuckles turn white. "Some people make judgments based on how someone looks instead of who they are," he says, trying to keep his voice calm. "It's not right, and it's not your fault." He tries 3 more private schools over the next 2 days. Each rejection is similar, couched in careful language about enrollment limits, educational philosophy, or fit. But Richard sees the pattern clearly now. The schools welcome him warmly until they meet the girls, and then excuses materialize. One administrator even has the audacity to suggest that the girls would be more comfortable somewhere less elite, where they wouldn't feel so out of place. Finally, Richard enrolls Destiny and Hope at Kennedy Elementary, a public school in his neighborhood. The principal, Martha Hayes, is kind and welcoming. She doesn't flinch when she meets the girls. She simply smiles and says they'll be wonderful additions to the school. Richard feels relieved, thinking at least one thing is going right. The girls start school the following Monday. They're excited, wearing new backpacks and outfits that Richard helped them pick out. They look like any other first graders heading off to learn. Richard feels hopeful. That hope lasts exactly 3 hours. Martha Hayes calls Richard at 11 o'clock. "Mr. Pounce." "Ashford," she says, her voice strained. "I need you to come to the school. There's been an incident." Richard arrives to find Hope crying in the principal's office, while Destiny sits silently, her face a mask of controlled fury. "What happened?" Richard demands. Martha sighs heavily. "Several mothers complained to me this morning about the girls being here. They claim they're concerned about having homeless children in class with their kids. They use terms like hygiene concerns and behavioral risks. One mother demanded her child be moved to a different classroom. The prejudice is so blatant, so cruel, that Richard is momentarily speechless. "Those mothers have no right," he finally says. "No, they don't," Martha agrees, "and I told them as much. But I wanted you to be aware of what the girls might face." She looks at Destiny and Hope with genuine sympathy. "I'm sorry, girls. Some people have small minds and even smaller hearts. You've done nothing wrong. But the damage is done. Over the next few days, the girls are isolated at school. Other children are told by their parents not to play with them. Mothers pull their children away when Destiny and Hope approach on the playground. Someone starts a rumor that the girls have lice, which is completely false but spreads anyway. Richard is furious and heartbroken watching them come home each day more withdrawn. Meanwhile, his lawyer Donald calls with devastating news. "Richard, there's a problem with your foster care application," Donald says. "What kind of problem?" Richard asks. "It's been flagged for additional review. Someone filed an anonymous complaint questioning your suitability as a foster parent. The complaint alleges you have no experience with children of different cultural backgrounds and raises concerns about your motivations. This is absurd," Richard says. "I raised 2 children. I'm financially stable. I have no criminal record." "I know," Donald agrees. "But the complaint triggered a formal review process. It could delay certification for months." "Who filed the complaint?" Richard demands. "That information is confidential," Donald says. "But Richard, there's something else. The complaint came through official channels, but my contacts at Child Services say it has the fingerprints of someone with inside access, someone on the board or with significant influence." Richard's blood runs cold. "Marcus Drummond," he says, "the CEO of Titan Healthcare. He's on the advisory board of Massachusetts Child Services." Donald is quiet for a moment. "I can't confirm that, but yes, Drummond has significant connections to child welfare agencies. He's a major donor and board member. If he wanted to block your application, he could do it." Richard calls Kenneth, who confirms his worst fears. "Drummond called me," Kenneth admits. "He knows you took in Angela Carter's daughters. He's not happy about it, Rich. He made it very clear that if you pursue this, if you start asking questions about what happened to Angela, he'll make your life hell. He has power, connections, and zero tolerance for threats to his company." So he's using his position on a child welfare board to keep me from helping two orphaned children, Richard says, his voice shaking with rage, because their mother dared to expose his company's crimes. Kenneth's silence is answer enough. "Rich, you need to understand what you're up against," Kenneth finally says. "Drummond is ruthless. He's destroyed people who threatened Titan Healthcare before. Journalists who wrote critical articles suddenly lost their jobs. Lawyers who took cases against the company found themselves facing ethics complaints. A state inspector who tried to shut down one of their facilities died in a car accident that was ruled mechanical failure but was awfully convenient." "You think he had someone killed?" Richard asks, shocked. "I think he's willing to do whatever it takes to protect his empire," Kenneth says. "And right now, you and those girls are threats he needs to neutralize." That evening, Richard finds Destiny in the library, reading one of Catherine's old books. She looks up when he enters, and her expression is far too old for her age. "Are you going to give up on us?" she asks quietly. "Because if you are, it's okay. We understand. Adults always give up eventually." Richard sits beside her. "I'm not giving up," he says. "I promise you, Destiny. I don't care what obstacles they put in my way. You and Hope are staying with me." She studies his face for a long moment, as if trying to determine if she can believe him. Then she asks the question that's been haunting her. "Mr. Richard, why do people hate us so much?" "We didn't do anything wrong. We're just kids." Richard has no good answer to give a 6-year-old about the reality of systemic racism, about how centuries of hatred and fear create systems designed to punish people for the color of their skin. So he simply says, "The world isn't fair, Destiny. Some people carry hate in their hearts, and they teach it to their children, and it spreads like a disease. But there are also good people who fight against that hate. Your mother was one of those people. Catherine was too. And I'm trying to be." Hope appears in the doorway, clutching a stuffed rabbit Richard bought her. "Can we have a family movie night?" she asks tentatively. "Like Mama Catherine used to do with us." Richard smiles despite everything. "Absolutely," he says. "You girls pick the movie. I'll make popcorn." As they settle on the couch to watch a Disney film, Richard realizes he's in the fight of his life. But looking at these two brave, resilient little girls who've survived more than most adults could handle, he knows it's a fight worth having. Richard sits in the office of private investigator Jamal Washington, a man whose reputation for tenacity and integrity is legendary in Boston. Jamal is a former police detective who left the force 5 years ago after witnessing one too many cases of racial profiling that his superiors refused to address. He's built a successful business exposing corporate corruption and civil rights violations. "Tell me everything about Angela Carter," Richard says. "I need to know what really happened to her, why she was blacklisted, why she died." Jamal studies Richard for a long moment. "You understand this is going to get ugly," he says. "People who go after Titan Healthcare tend to find their lives falling apart." "I don't care," Richard replies. "Those children deserve to know the truth about their mother, and so do I." Jamal nods and accepts the case. Over the next 2 weeks, he digs deep into Angela's history, and what he uncovers is both heartbreaking and enraging. Jamal presents his findings in a thick folder. Angela Carter was a registered nurse at Greenvale Nursing Home, owned and operated by Titan Healthcare Corporation, he begins. She was an excellent nurse, had stellar reviews, genuinely cared about her patients. But about 3 years ago, she started noticing disturbing patterns. Elderly black patients were being heavily sedated without medical necessity. They were given antipsychotic medications to keep them docile and compliant. Meanwhile, their Medicare records showed treatments and procedures that never actually happened. Titan was billing the government for phantom services. Richard feels sick. "That's Medicare fraud. That's a federal crime." "It gets worse," Jamal continues. "Angela documented everything. She took photos, copied records, recorded conversations. She reported it to the facility administrator, who told her to mind her business. She reported it to the Massachusetts Department of Public Health. They opened an investigation and then suddenly closed it 2 weeks later, citing insufficient evidence. She tried the FBI, who said they'd look into it but never followed up. Finally, she went public, giving an interview to a local news station. The story aired once, and then the station received a cease and desist letter from Titan Healthcare's lawyers threatening a defamation lawsuit. The station retracted the story and fired the reporter who covered it. "What happened to Angela?" Richard asks, though he already knows it's nothing good. Titan Healthcare destroyed her nursing license, Jamal says. They filed ethics complaints, claiming she'd violated patient privacy by sharing medical records, even though she'd followed proper whistleblower protocols. They got her license suspended pending review. During that suspension, they made sure no other healthcare facility would hire her. She was blacklisted throughout Massachusetts. She lost her apartment, ended up homeless with 2 6-year-old daughters. Jamal pulls out more documents. Here's where it gets really dark. 3 weeks after Angela's story aired, Greenvale Nursing Home had a fire. It started in the middle of the night in the records room where Angela's documentation was stored. 2 elderly black patients died. The fire inspector ruled it electrical malfunction, accidental. But I've talked to the fire inspector who was first on the scene, and he's willing to speak off the record. He says the sprinkler system in that records room had been manually disabled. The fire pattern suggested accelerant. He reported his concerns to his supervisor, who buried the report. The official investigation was closed within 48 hours. Richard stares at the photos of the burned facility. "You think Titan Healthcare deliberately set that fire? I think someone wanted to destroy evidence and didn't care who got hurt in the process," Jamal says. The 2 patients who died were residents Angela had specifically documented as victims of abuse. Very convenient. Richard thinks he might be sick. This is murder. This is corporate murder. "Can you prove it?" Richard asks. "Not yet," Jamal admits. The maintenance worker who was on duty that night disappeared 2 days after the fire. No one knows where he is, but I can prove the Medicare fraud, the patient abuse, and the systematic blacklisting. I've tracked down 4 other nurses who worked at Greenvale and other Titan facilities. They're all willing to talk now, especially since Angela died. They have documentation, testimony, evidence of a pattern spanning multiple facilities. Richard takes the folder. "I'm going to the FBI with this." Jamal nods approvingly. "I've also made copies and secured them in 3 separate locations. If anything happens to you or me, this information will be released to every major news outlet in the country." "Smart," Richard says. While Richard is uncovering corporate crimes, the girls are facing their own battles. At school, Destiny gets into a physical altercation. Richard receives a frantic call from Principal Hayes, asking him to come immediately. When he arrives, he finds Destiny sitting in the office with a split lip and scraped knuckles. Hope is crying beside her. "What happened?" Richard demands. Principal Hayes looks deeply uncomfortable. According to witnesses, 3 boys in Destiny's grade were taunting Hope on the playground. They called her a charity case and used a racial slur. Destiny intervened physically. She punched one boy and pushed the other 2. "Which of those words?" Hope asks, anger making his voice sharp. "What did they call my daughter?" Martha hesitates, then says quietly, "The N-word, Mr. Ashford. They called her the N-word." "And what's being done about those boys?" Richard asks. "That's complicated," Martha says. "The boys claim they were just playing and didn't mean anything by it. Their parents are very upset that Destiny hit their children. They're demanding she be expelled for violence." "Let me understand this," Richard says, his voice dangerously calm. 3 boys use a vicious racial slur against a 6-year-old girl, and when her sister defends her, the victim is the one being punished. Martha looks pained. "Mr. Slur, Ashford, I understand your frustration, but Whitman Academy has a zero-tolerance policy for physical violence. The boys have been given detention, but Destiny actually struck someone. That requires a more serious response." "What about zero tolerance for racism?" Richard counters. "Where's that policy? Those words are violence too. They're psychological violence against a child." Martha sighs. "I'm suspending Destiny for 3 days. The boys are getting in school detention for 1 day each. It's the best I can do given the policies and the pressure I'm receiving from the school board." Several of those boys' parents are major donors. Richard feels defeat and fury mixing. Destiny looks up at him with eyes that have already learned too much about injustice. "I'm sorry, Mr. Richard," she says. "I know I'm not supposed to hit people, but they hurt Hope. I had to protect her." Richard kneels down and looks both girls in the eyes. "You did exactly right, Destiny," he says. "I'm proud of you for defending your sister. Don't ever apologize for standing up against people who try to hurt you with hate." In the car, Hope asks quietly, "Are we bad kids? Because it feels like we're always getting in trouble just for existing." "You're the best kids I've ever known," Richard says fiercely. "The world is what's broken, not you." That afternoon, Victoria calls. Richard almost doesn't answer, but curiosity wins out. She's calling to offer an olive branch, or so she claims. "Rich, I've been thinking," Victoria says, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "I realize I was harsh the other day. I want to help you with this foster care situation." Richard is immediately suspicious. "How?" "I've consulted with my lawyer, and we've prepared some documents that would place the girls in a wonderful foster home I've selected," Victoria explains. "You could still maintain contact with them, visit regularly. It's the best solution for everyone." She's trying to take them away, Richard realizes. She's found a legal loophole. When Richard refuses, Victoria drops her pretense of kindness. "Fine," she says coldly, "but you should know I've filed a formal complaint with Child Services. I'm alleging that you're emotionally unstable following Catherine's death, and that you're exploiting these children for some misguided sense of redemption. Your foster application will be denied, Richard. I'll make sure of it. You're willing to hurt 2 orphaned children to protect the family reputation," Richard asks, disgusted. "I'm willing to protect you from yourself," Victoria snaps, "and to protect the Ashford name from scandal." That night, Richard's house is vandalized again. Someone spray paints a vicious racial slur across his front gate, along with the words, "Take your N-words somewhere else." The security cameras, which should have captured everything, were mysteriously disabled. Richard stands in his driveway at midnight, looking at the hateful message, and feels the full weight of the fight he's taken on. The girls see the graffiti the next morning before Richard can have it cleaned. Hope bursts into tears. Destiny just stares at it, her face expressionless. "Mr. Richard," she says quietly, "why do people hate us so much? We're just little kids. We didn't choose to be born with dark skin." Richard has no answer that will make this okay. He simply pulls both girls into his arms and holds them while they cry. Later, after the graffiti is cleaned and the girls are in bed, Richard sits in Catherine's study reading her journals again. He finds an entry from 6 months before she died. "I'm so angry at this world," Catherine wrote. "I'm angry at the systems that destroy people like Angela. I'm angry at myself for living in comfort while people suffered. I'm angry at Richard for being blind to all of it. But mostly, I'm angry that I'm dying and won't be here to protect these girls. They're going to face so much hatred, so much cruelty, just for existing while black. They need someone who will fight for them harder than they've ever had to fight for anything. I hope Richard can be that person. I hope he remembers who he was before money made him comfortable with other people's pain." Richard closes the journal and makes a promise to his dead wife. "I'll be that person," he whispers into the empty room. "I swear to you, Catherine, I won't let them down." Richard walks into an emergency board meeting at Ashford Enterprises, knowing his career is about to implode. The conference room is full of the 12 board members who've governed the company for decades. Kenneth sits at the head of the table, which tells Richard everything he needs to know about where loyalties lie. "Gentlemen," Richard begins, but Kenneth cuts him off. "Richard, we need to discuss the company's exposure due to your recent personal decisions," Kenneth says. "Your involvement with the Carter children and your investigation into Titan Healthcare is creating significant problems." Richard looks around the table. These are men he's worked with for years, helped make wealthy, considered friends. Now they won't meet his eyes. "What kind of problems?" Richard asks, though he knows. "We've had 3 major clients threaten to pull their contracts," Kenneth explains. "Investors are nervous. The board has received calls from Titan Healthcare's legal team threatening action if you continue making unfounded accusations." Most concerning, we've discovered that your current activities violate the company's ethics policies regarding conflicts of interest. That's absurd, Richard says. There's no conflict of interest in helping two orphan children. Kenneth slides a folder across the table. Our attorneys disagree. You're using company resources, your position, and the Ashford name to conduct a personal vendetta against a corporation in which we hold significant investments. You're jeopardizing tens of millions of dollars in value. The board believes it's in everyone's best interest if you take a leave of absence while we sort this out. A leave of absence, Richard repeats. You're trying to force me out of the company I built. It's for the good of the company, Kenneth says. But he can't quite meet Richard's eyes. We've already drafted the paperwork. You'll retain your shares but step down as CEO. I'll assume operational control temporarily. Richard understands completely. Kenneth has orchestrated a coup, betrayed by his oldest friend for money and power. Fine, Richard says, his voice cold. Let's vote. The vote is 9-3 in favor of his removal. Richard isn't surprised, but the betrayal still stings. As he stands to leave, Kenneth tries one more time. Rich, this doesn't have to be permanent. Walk away from the Carter situation. Stop investigating Titan. Focus on rebuilding your reputation. In 6 months, we can bring you back. Richard looks at the man he thought was his brother. I'd rather lose everything than live as a coward, he says. Then you're a fool, Kenneth replies. Richard goes home and finds Catherine's final journal, the one he hasn't had the courage to fully read. He opens it to the last entries and begins reading. Her final weeks of life, written in increasingly shaky handwriting as the cancer ravaged her body. I've been investigating Richard's business dealings, she wrote. I needed to understand how deep the corruption goes. What I found breaks my heart. Ashford Enterprises has investments in 17 healthcare corporations that have been accused of Medicare fraud, patient abuse, or civil rights violations. Richard doesn't know because he delegated everything to Kenneth years ago. Kenneth has been deliberately hiding these investments, collecting profits from human suffering while keeping Richard ignorant. The entry continues. I confronted Kenneth 2 weeks ago. He admitted he's been using Richard's trust and reputation to build relationships with corporations that Richard would never approve of. Kenneth is getting kickbacks, side deals, board positions. He's corrupt, and he's using my husband as cover. I wanted to tell Richard, but I'm dying. The cancer is in my brain now. I'm running out of time, so I've made a different choice. I've left evidence for Richard to find. The girls will be his test. If he chooses them over money, if he chooses justice over comfort, then he'll have the courage to see what Kenneth has done. If he doesn't, then maybe I was wrong about the man I married. Richard feels like the floor has dropped out from under him. His best friend has been embezzling, taking bribes, building a criminal empire using the Ashford name, and Catherine knew. She died knowing and couldn't tell him. He reads the rest of the entries, each one more damning than the last. Catherine documented shell corporations, offshore accounts, fraudulent contracts. She was building a case against Kenneth. The final entry, written 3 days before she died, is addressed directly to Richard. My love, if you're reading this, it means you chose correctly. You chose the girls. You chose justice. Now you need to finish what I started. Kenneth has betrayed you in every way possible. He's been stealing from the company for years, tens of millions of dollars. But more than that, he's corrupted everything you built. Your name, your legacy, your values. He's turned your company into a vehicle for profiting from human suffering. The evidence is in the safe deposit box at Boston First National, Box 257. The key is taped to the back of our wedding photo in my study. Take him down, Richard. Take all of them down. Not for revenge, but because it's right. Because people are dying while men like Kenneth profit. I love you. I've always loved you. Wake up and fight. Catherine. Richard finds the key and the wedding photo, his hands shaking. The next morning, he goes to the bank and opens the safe deposit box. Inside is a comprehensive dossier that would make any federal prosecutor's mouth water. Shell corporations, falsified documents, evidence of bribes paid to health inspectors and politicians, records of kickbacks from Titan Healthcare and a dozen other corporations. Kenneth has been running a criminal enterprise for years. Richard takes everything to his lawyer Donald, who looks through the evidence with growing horror. "This is racketeering," Donald says. "This is wire fraud, tax evasion, possibly money laundering. Kenneth could go to prison for 20 years. "What about me?" Richard asks. "Could I be charged?" Donald considers carefully. "If you can prove you had no knowledge of these activities, you should be okay. But you'll need to cooperate fully with federal investigators. And Richard, this will destroy the company. When this comes out, Ashford Enterprises will collapse. Everything you built will be gone." "I know," Richard says, "but Catherine was right. Some things matter more than money." That afternoon, Richard calls another emergency board meeting, but this time he's brought Donald and boxes of evidence. He also alerted the FBI, who are waiting outside. Kenneth smiles when Richard enters, thinking he's here to beg for his job back. The smile disappears when Richard begins laying out evidence of Kenneth's crimes. "For 7 years," Richard says, "my partner and friend has been running a criminal operation using this company. He's stolen approximately $63 million. He's taken bribes, he's falsified documents, and he's destroyed the reputation of the Ashford name while enriching himself." Kenneth's face goes pale, then red with rage. "You're insane," he sputters. "You're trying to frame me because I won't support your ridiculous crusade for those children." Richard slides a document across the table. "This is a recorded phone conversation between you and Marcus Drummond, CEO of Titan Healthcare. You agreed to sabotage my foster care application in exchange for a position on Titan's board and $2 million. You manufactured evidence against me to trigger an SEC investigation. You betrayed me, Kenneth. You betrayed everything we built together." Kenneth stands up, panicking now. The other board members are reading the evidence with shocked expressions. "This is taken out of context," Kenneth says. Richard misunderstands the complexity of modern business. At that moment, FBI agents enter the conference room. Kenneth Morrison, an agent, says, "You're under arrest for wire fraud, racketeering, and conspiracy." The agents read Kenneth his rights while he screams that this is a setup, that Richard has lost his mind, that he'll fight this. They lead him out in handcuffs. The board is in chaos. Richard addresses them one final time. "I'm divesting all of Ashford Enterprises holdings in corporations engaged in healthcare fraud or civil rights violations," he announces. "This will cost approximately $60 million in immediate losses. Anyone who wants to vote me out, do it now. But understand, I'm doing this regardless. If I'm not running this company, I'll do it as a private citizen and make sure every news outlet in America knows what this company has been doing." Several board members resign on the spot. Others vote to keep Richard and support the divestiture. The company survives, barely, but it's a shadow of what it was. Richard goes home exhausted, emotionally destroyed, financially devastated. He's lost his company, his best friend, most of his wealth. The SEC investigation is still hanging over him. Kenneth's arrest triggered a media firestorm. Reporters are camped outside his house. His phone rings constantly with people he thought were friends, now calling to distance themselves. He sits in his living room, staring at nothing, and wonders if Catherine would be proud or disappointed. He's done everything she asked, but the cost has been everything he had. Destiny finds him there. She climbs into his lap, something she rarely does. "Are you okay, Mr. Richard?" she asks. Richard almost laughs, a 6-year-old asking if he's okay. "No, sweetheart," he admits. "I'm not okay. I just lost almost everything." "Is it because of us?" she asks, her voice small and frightened. "Are we ruining your life?" Richard hugs her tight. "You're saving my life," he says. "Everything I lost because it was built on lies and corruption. You helped me see that. You and Hope are the best things that ever happened to me." Hope appears in the doorway, and she's been crying. "We heard the news," she says. "People are saying mean things about you on TV, that you're crazy, that you threw away your fortune for nothing." Richard opens his arm, and Hope joins them on the couch. "I didn't throw it away for nothing," he tells them. "I threw it away for you. For your mother's memory, for your grandmother Catherine, for the chance to be someone worth being." Destiny pulls back to look at him, and there are tears on her face. "You're already worth being," she says. "You're the first person except Mama Catherine who ever fought for us. That makes you our dad." The word dad hits Richard like a lightning bolt. Hope adds softly, "Real dads don't give up. And you haven't given up on us even though everyone says you should. So yeah, you're our dad now." Richard breaks down completely, holding both girls while he cries. They've lost everything material, but they've found something infinitely more valuable. They've found each other. Richard is in his study working with Donald to prepare his defense against the false SEC charges when the doorbell rings. It's 10 in the morning on a Tuesday. Through the window, he sees an official government vehicle. His stomach drops. He opens the door to find Sandra Mills, the caseworker from Child Protective Services, along with 2 police officers. "Mr. Ashford," Sandra says, and she looks genuinely pained. "I have a court order for the emergency removal of Destiny and Hope Carter from your custody." Richard feels like he's been punched. What? Why? "There are serious allegations regarding your fitness as a guardian," Sandra explains, handing him paperwork. "Judge Patricia Holbrook signed this order this morning. You're currently under investigation by the SEC for financial crimes. There are concerns about the stability of the home environment." "This can't be happening," Richard says, scanning the court order. "This is illegitimate. Judge Holbrook sits on the board of Titan Healthcare's charitable foundation. This is retaliation." "I understand your concerns," Sandra says, "but I have to follow the court order. Please get the girls. They need to come with me now." The girls have been listening from upstairs. They appear at the top of the staircase, both in tears. "No," Destiny screams. "You can't take us. We won't go." Hope is sobbing. "Daddy, please don't let them take us." The word "daddy" from Hope's lips breaks Richard's heart into pieces. "Girls, it's going to be okay," Richard tries to say, but he doesn't believe it himself. "We'll fight this in court. This is temporary." Destiny runs down the stairs, and she's clutching Catherine's old tablet. "We know what you did," she shouts at Sandra. "We have proof." Sandra looks confused. "Proof of what?" Destiny holds up the tablet triumphantly. "Mama Catherine taught us to record things if we ever felt unsafe. She said evidence protects people when liars try to hurt them. We've been recording everything. Conversations, phone calls, everything." Richard stares at his daughter in shock. "What recordings, Destiny? Show me." Destiny opens the tablet and starts playing audio files. The first is a conversation between Victoria and her lawyer, discussing how to fabricate a custody case against Richard. Victoria's voice is crystal clear. "We need to make it look like he's unstable, emotionally compromised. The girls are just pawns in his grief. If we can get them into a foster home I control, we can manage this situation." The second recording is even more damning. It's Kenneth Morrison on the phone with someone, presumably Marcus Drummond. "I'm manufacturing evidence against Rich for the SEC, Kenneth says. Financial impropriety in his charitable foundation. It's completely false, but it'll tie him up in investigations for months. By the time he's cleared, the girls will be long gone." The third recording is the most shocking. It's Victoria again, speaking to someone Richard doesn't recognize. Those little opportunists know how to play the victim card. Victoria's voice drips with venom. "They're using the race card to manipulate my brother. He's too stupid to see they're just ghetto kids looking for a meal ticket. Get them out of his house before they destroy the family name completely." Sandra Mills stands frozen, her face pale. "Mr. Ashford, I need to hear all of these recordings." Richard plays them all. There are over a dozen conversations documenting the conspiracy between Victoria, Kenneth, Marcus Drummond, and even Judge Holbrook. One recording catches Holbrook on the phone with Drummond. "I've signed the emergency removal order, like you asked," the judge says. "The case will be assigned to a caseworker who understands the situation. We'll get those children into a facility where they can't cause any more problems for your company." "This is conspiracy," Sandra says, her voice shaking. "This is judicial corruption. These recordings are evidence of criminal activity." She immediately calls her supervisor. Within an hour, Richard's house is full of people: Donald the lawyer, Sandra's supervisor, and investigators from the Massachusetts Attorney General's office. The recordings are authenticated and copied. Donald files emergency motions to vacate the removal order and expose the conspiracy. The media, already swarming Richard's case, gets wind of the recordings. By evening, the story has exploded. Reporter Michelle Torres, who's been covering Richard's fight, breaks the story with a comprehensive exposé. Billionaire fights corporate giants to protect two homeless girls. Conspiracy exposed. The article details Angela Carter's whistleblowing, her daughter's homelessness, Richard's battle to adopt them, and now the conspiracy involving his sister, business partner, and a sitting judge to take the children away. The public response is immediate and divided. Richard receives death threats. Someone sends a package containing a dead rat and a note saying, "Race traitor, you'll pay for loving those animals." The house is vandalized again. But there's also an outpouring of support. Thousands of people send messages of encouragement. Donations pour into the Mercy Street Community Center. People organize protests outside Titan Healthcare's headquarters. A crowd gathers outside Richard's house, not to threaten but to protect. Volunteers form a perimeter, keeping watch day and night. Marcus Drummond releases a statement calling the accusations baseless and defamatory, threatening massive lawsuits against Richard and anyone who repeats the claims. Kenneth Morrison holds a press conference from jail, claiming Richard has manufactured evidence and is suffering from a mental breakdown following his wife's death. Victoria appears on a morning talk show, tearful and sympathetic. "My brother is not well," she says to the camera. "He's using these poor children as a substitute for his grief. As his sister, I'm heartbroken watching him destroy himself. Our family just wants him to get help." The performance is Oscar-worthy, and half the country believes her. That night, Richard sits with Destiny and Hope, both frightened by the media circus surrounding them. The girls cling to him. "Are we going to be separated?" Hope asks for the 100th time. "No," Richard promises. "I won't let that happen." But privately, he's terrified. The legal system is corrupt, his enemies are powerful, and he's running out of options. Destiny, always the perceptive one, looks up at him with ancient eyes. "You're scared," she observes. Richard considers lying, but decides these girls deserve honesty. "Yes, I'm scared," he admits. "I'm scared I won't be strong enough to protect you, that the system is too broken to fix, that all the money and power and hate arrayed against us will win." Destiny takes his hand. "Mama Catherine told us something before she died," she says. "She said the world breaks everyone, but some people are stronger in the broken places. She said you were one of those people. You just had to remember." Richard pulls both girls into his arms. "Your Mama Catherine was the smartest person I ever knew," he says, "and I'm going to prove her right." Later that night, after the girls are asleep, Richard receives an unexpected call from FBI agent Tom Bradley. "Mr. Ashford," Bradley says, "I need you to listen carefully. My task force has been investigating Titan Healthcare and Marcus Drummond for 18 months. The evidence you and Jamal Washington uncovered has been crucial, but we needed more. Your foster daughter's recordings provided the final pieces. Judge Holbrook is being arrested tomorrow morning for corruption and civil rights violations. Kenneth Morrison is facing additional charges, including conspiracy and witness tampering. Victoria Ashford will be arrested for fraud and conspiracy. And Marcus Drummond," Bradley continues, "is being indicted on 37 counts, including Medicare fraud, witness tampering, obstruction of justice, and manslaughter in connection with the Greenvale fire. We have the maintenance worker who set the fire. He's agreed to testify that Drummond's people paid him $50,000 and threatened his family if he refused. Your daughter's mother, Angela Carter, was number 38 in a pattern of targeting black whistleblowers. We've identified 37 others over 12 years. 4 of them died in suspicious accidents. Richard can barely breathe. You're taking him down. All of them. Tomorrow," Bradley confirms. "And Mr. Ashford, off the record, what you've done for those girls, fighting this system, it matters. Angela Carter was a hero. She deserves justice. So do her daughters." Richard hangs up and sits in the dark, overwhelmed. Justice is coming, but at what cost? The arrests happen simultaneously at 6 in the morning. Richard watches the news with destiny and hope, as footage shows Marcus Drummond being led from his mansion in handcuffs, Kenneth Morrison being taken from his jail cell to federal court for additional charges, Judge Patricia Holbrook arrested in her chambers, and Victoria Ashford arrested at her home while screaming about her rights and her brother's insanity. The news anchors are breathless with the scope of the story. Federal prosecutors have unsealed indictments in what they're calling one of the largest healthcare fraud and civil rights cases in Massachusetts history, the anchor reports. The case centers on Titan Healthcare Corporation and its systematic targeting of whistleblowers, particularly black women who exposed patient abuse and Medicare fraud. Richard watches FBI agent Bradley give a press conference. This investigation began 18 months ago, Bradley explains to reporters. But the courage of one man, Richard Ashford, who chose to protect 2 orphaned children despite losing everything, helped us build an airtight case. He exposed a conspiracy that reached into the highest levels of Boston's legal and business communities. Bradley holds up a photograph. Angela Carter was a hero, he says. She tried to stop a corporation from abusing vulnerable elderly patients. For her bravery, she was destroyed, blacklisted, left homeless. She died of treatable pneumonia because she couldn't afford medical care. Her death, and the deaths of 4 other whistleblowers, are being investigated as homicides. The press conference continues with devastating revelations. Marcus Drummond faces 37 federal counts. The evidence shows a pattern of targeting black healthcare workers who reported abuse. When they went public, Drummond's people destroyed their careers, blacklisted them throughout the industry, and in several cases, arranged accidents. The Greenvale fire was arson, Bradley reveals. We have testimony from the maintenance worker who said it. He was paid $50,000 and told his family would be killed if he refused or talked. 2 elderly black patients died in that fire. Their names were Dorothy Jenkins and Robert Matthews. They were both residents Angela Carter had documented as victims of abuse. Federal prosecutors believe they were murdered to eliminate witnesses. The public reaction is explosive. Titan Healthcare's stock plummets. Protests erupt outside their facilities. Employees come forward with more stories of abuse and fraud. The company collapses within days. Kenneth Morrison's attorney tries to negotiate a plea deal. Kenneth claims he was pressured by Drummond, that he didn't understand how far the conspiracy went. But the recordings from Destiny's tablet destroy his defense. He's heard clearly coordinating the destruction of evidence and the false SEC charges against Richard. He eventually pleads guilty to racketeering, wire fraud, and conspiracy, accepting a 15-year prison sentence. Victoria fights the charges, hiring an expensive legal team that paints her as a concerned sister manipulated by others. But the recordings of her racist language and active participation in the conspiracy are damning. She's convicted on 7 counts, including fraud, conspiracy, and civil rights violations. The judge sentences her to 7 years in federal prison. During sentencing, Victoria turns to Richard in the courtroom. "This is your fault," she screams. "You destroyed this family for 2 little N words." The judge holds her in contempt, adding 6 months to her sentence. Judge Patricia Holbrook is suspended from the bench and faces criminal charges. The evidence shows she accepted bribes from Drummond and used her position to target families that threatened his interests. She eventually pleads guilty to corruption and receives a 5-year sentence. Marcus Drummond goes to trial. The evidence against him is overwhelming. Jamal Washington testifies about the pattern of targeting whistleblowers. Former Titan Healthcare employees testify about the abuse. The maintenance worker describes being paid to set the fire. Financial experts detail the Medicare fraud scheme. Richard is called to testify about Angela Carter's daughters and the conspiracy to take them from him. On the stand, Richard tells Angela's story, her courage, her destruction, her death. He describes finding destiny and hope at Catherine's grave and the battle to protect them. The jury deliberates for 3 hours, guilty on all 37 counts. Marcus Drummond is sentenced to 35 years in federal prison. As he's led away, he glares at Richard. "You destroyed my life over 2 worthless children," he snarls. Richard meets his eyes. "Those children are worth more than your entire empire," he says. Meanwhile, the SEC investigation into Richard is dropped. The evidence proves conclusively that Kenneth manufactured the allegations. Richard's reputation is publicly restored. The board of Ashford Enterprises offers to reinstate him as CEO with a formal apology. Richard declines. The company is tainted by what Kenneth did, he explains. I'm selling my majority stake. I'll keep enough to remain on the board and ensure we continue the divestiture from corrupt healthcare corporations, but someone else needs to lead. The board is shocked but accepts his decision. Richard announces the creation of the Catherine and Angela Carter Foundation for Healthcare Justice. The foundation will use his remaining wealth to protect whistleblowers, provide legal support for families destroyed by corporate retaliation, and advocate for healthcare reform. The foster care process, suddenly free of corruption, moves forward rapidly. Richard's application is approved. 6 months after finding the girls at Catherine's grave, he becomes their legal foster father. His lawyer begins preparing adoption paperwork. Jamal Washington continues investigating and finds the former pastor of the church Angela attended. The pastor reveals he's been holding a letter Angela wrote for her daughters, to be given to them when they were older or if she died. Richard takes Destiny and Hope to meet Pastor James, a kind, elderly black man who clearly loved Angela. He hands them a sealed envelope addressed to "My precious girls." Richard helps them open it and reads the letter aloud. "My beautiful Destiny and Hope," Angela wrote. "If you're reading this, I'm gone. I'm so sorry I couldn't be there to raise you, to protect you, to watch you grow into the amazing women I know you'll become. I failed you, and I will carry that regret into whatever comes after this life. But I want you to know something important. You were not born into an easy world. You're black girls in America, which means people will judge you before they know you. They'll see your skin and make assumptions about your worth, your intelligence, your potential. Some will hate you for no reason except the color you were born with. It's not fair, it's evil, but it's the reality you'll face. Don't let it break you. Your grandmother, my mother, told me something when I was your age. She said, 'Baby, the world is going to try to tell you you're less than. Your job is to prove every single day that you're more than they can imagine. Fight for what's right even when it costs you everything, because living on your knees is worse than dying on your feet.'" The letter continues. "I fought. I tried to protect people who couldn't protect themselves. It destroyed me, but I don't regret it. Those patients deserve someone to stand up for them. You deserve a mother who showed you that courage matters more than comfort. I hope you remember me not as the woman who became homeless, but as the woman who refused to be silent in the face of evil. Mama Catherine promised to take care of you, if anything happened to me. She's dying too, I know that, but she swore she had a plan. She said there's a man, her husband, who forgot how to be the person he was meant to be. She thinks you can help him remember. She thinks you can save each other. I don't know if that's true, but I trust Catherine. She's the best person I ever met. If she believes in this man, then maybe you can too. Find people who see you, my babies. Not your skin, not your circumstances, not what the world says you should be, but who you actually are. Find people who will fight for you the way I wish I could have fought better. Those people will be your real family. Blood doesn't make family. Love does. Choice does. Standing together when the world tries to tear you apart, that's family. I love you more than all the stars in the sky. I'm sorry I couldn't give you the life you deserved. Be brave, be kind, be fiercer than anyone expects. And know that your mama loved you until her very last breath, and will love you forever after. Your mama, Angela Carter." By the time Richard finishes reading, all three of them are crying. Destiny clutches the letter to her chest. "She wanted us to be strong," she says. Hope adds, "She wanted us to find you. She and Mama Catherine planned it." Richard realizes the full scope of what Catherine did. She orchestrated everything, leaving clues and evidence, bringing Richard to the cemetery at the exact moment the girls would be there, creating a test that would either wake him up or prove he was beyond saving. Two dying mothers built a bridge across death itself to save their children. And somehow, impossibly, it worked. 6 months later, Richard stands in a courthouse waiting for the adoption hearing that will make everything official. He's wearing his best suit. Destiny and Hope are in beautiful dresses, their hair done up with ribbons. They're nervous and excited, clutching his hands tightly. The courtroom is packed with supporters. People from Mercy Street Community Center fill the benches. Jamal Washington is there. Sandra Mills from Child Services sits in the front row, smiling. Even FBI agent Bradley took the day off to attend. Judge Maria Santos, a black woman in her 50s known for her fairness and integrity, presides. She's reviewed the case thoroughly and scheduled this hearing to finalize the adoption. The proceedings are straightforward at first. Judge Santos asks Richard about his ability to care for the girls, his understanding of the challenges they'll face, his commitment to honoring their mother's memory and cultural heritage. Richard answers honestly and from the heart. He talks about how Destiny and Hope saved him from a life of comfortable indifference, how they taught him that courage means standing up even when it costs everything, how they've become his reason for getting up every morning. The judge asks the girls if they want to be adopted by Richard Ashford. Both answer with enthusiastic yeses. Destiny adds, "He's already our dad. We just want it to be official." Judge Santos smiles. "This seems like a straightforward adoption," she says. "But before I sign the order, I need to address one final matter. Mr. Ashford, I have a sealed letter that was given to your attorney with instructions to be opened only at this hearing. Do you know what this is about?" Richard shakes his head, confused. Donald Pierce stands and hands a sealed envelope to the judge. He looks as puzzled as Richard feels. Judge Santos opens the envelope and reads silently. Her expression shifts from professional neutrality to shock to something like wonder. She looks at Richard over the document. "Mr. Ashford, this letter is from your late wife, Catherine. She gave it to your attorney 6 months before her death with very specific instructions." Richard feels his heart hammering. What does it say? Judge Santos seems to struggle with how to proceed. "I think," she says carefully, "this letter should be read aloud. It contains information that fundamentally changes the nature of this adoption." She begins reading in Catherine's voice, captured in her careful handwriting. "My dearest Richard, if you're hearing this, you've passed the test I didn't know I was setting. You chose the girls. You chose justice over comfort, love over money, courage over fear. I'm so proud of you. But there's something you need to know, something I discovered 6 months before I died and didn't have the strength or time to tell you in person. 23 years ago, you had an affair with Jessica Morgan, a junior associate at your firm. You ended it after 3 months and never told me. I found out years later through an anonymous letter. I was angry, heartbroken, but I forgave you because our marriage was stronger than one mistake. What you didn't know, what Jessica never told you, is that she was pregnant. She left the company and moved to Chicago. She had a baby girl and raised her alone. That girl grew up to become a nurse named Angela Carter. The courtroom goes completely silent. Richard feels like the ground has disappeared beneath him. Catherine's letter continues. I met Angela by chance at Mercy Street Community Center 2 years ago. When I learned her story, her strength, her fight for justice, I saw something familiar in her. She reminded me of you, the young you who believed in standing up for people. On impulse, I asked if she'd be willing to take a DNA test. I told her I had a medical reason. She agreed. The results confirmed what I suspected. Angela was your daughter, Richard. Your daughter you never knew existed. Which means Destiny and Hope aren't just 2 orphan children you're saving. They're your granddaughters, your blood, your family. Richard can't breathe. The entire courtroom is staring at him. Destiny and Hope look confused, not understanding. Judge Santos continues reading. Angela didn't want you to know. She said you had a family, a life, and her existence would only bring pain. She made me promise not to tell you unless something happened to her. She didn't want your money or your guilt. She just wanted to raise her daughters with dignity. But then she got sick. Then I got sick. And I realized I was running out of time, so I made a different choice. I couldn't tell you directly because you weren't ready. You'd been asleep for so long, comfortable in your wealth while people suffered. You needed to wake up first. You needed to find your own courage. So I gambled everything on your character. I brought you to the girls the only way I knew would work. I let you discover them at my grave. I left clues in my journals. I orchestrated a test of who you really are when everything is stripped away. Would you choose money or people? Comfort or courage? Your old life or a new one? You passed, my love. You fought for them. You lost your company, your fortune, your reputation. You stood up to power and corruption. You became the man I always knew you could be. And now you know the truth. You weren't saving strangers. You were finding your family. Angela was your daughter. Destiny and Hope are your granddaughters. The blood of your blood, the legacy Catherine left you. The letter concludes with Catherine's final thoughts. I don't ask for forgiveness for keeping this secret. I ask that you love them completely, the way you would have loved them if you'd known from the beginning. They are your blood, your legacy, and your redemption. Angela deserved better from the world. She deserved better from you, though you didn't know she existed. Honor her memory by raising her daughters to be strong, brave, and fierce. Teach them that their worth isn't determined by the color of their skin or the circumstances of their birth. Teach them to fight for justice even when it costs everything. Teach them to be the people this broken world needs. You've been given a second chance, Richard. A chance to be the father you never got to be for Angela. A chance to build a family from the ashes of tragedy. Don't waste it. I love you. I've always loved you. And I'm so proud of who you've become. Wake up and live, my darling. Wake up and love these children the way I love you. Forever yours, Catherine. Judge Santos finishes reading and looks at Richard, whose face is wet with tears. Mr. Ashford, she says gently. Did you know any of this? Richard shakes his head, unable to speak. He looks down at Destiny and Hope, seeing them with new eyes. His granddaughters, his family. Destiny, always perceptive, understands first. We're your granddaughters, she says, wonder in her voice. Our mama was your daughter. Richard kneels so he's at their level. Yes, he manages to say through his tears, your beautiful, brave mother was my daughter, and I never knew. I should have been there for all of you. I'm so sorry I wasn't. Hope asks the only question that matters. Does this change anything? Richard pulls them both into his arms, holding them like he'll never let go. Yes, he says, it changes everything. Because now I know why I loved you both the moment I met you. You're not just two little girls who needed me. You're my family. You've always been my family. I just didn't know it yet. Judge Santos wipes her own eyes. Well, she says, this certainly complicates the adoption proceedings. Technically, you're their biological grandfather, which changes the legal framework. Richard looks up, panicked. Does that mean it won't go through? On the contrary, Judge Santos says with a warm smile, it makes this even more clear-cut. I hereby grant the adoption petition. Richard Ashford, you are now the legal father of Destiny Angela Carter and Hope Catherine Carter. The courtroom erupts in applause. People are crying, cheering, hugging each other. Richard holds his daughters, his granddaughters, his family, and feels the broken pieces of his life finally coming together. 6 months pass in a blur of healing and growth. Richard sells his Beacon Hill mansion and buys a comfortable home in Roxbury, near Mercy Street Community Center where Catherine and Angela met. He volunteers there 3 days a week, using his business expertise to help other families navigate systems designed to keep them down. The Catherine and Angela Carter Foundation becomes a powerful force for change. In its first year, the foundation helps 32 whistleblower families find housing, legal support, and protection from retaliation. Richard hires Jamal Washington as the foundation's Director of Investigations. Destiny and Hope thrive in their new school, surrounded by diverse students and teachers who celebrate their brilliance and resilience. Destiny wants to be a lawyer like the ones who helped their grandfather. Hope wants to be a nurse like their mother and grandmother, Catherine. The media eventually loses interest in their story, moving on to the next scandal. Richard is grateful. They need privacy to heal, to build their family, to figure out what normal looks like. On the first anniversary of the adoption, Richard takes the girls to visit the cemetery. They've placed Angela's headstone next to Catherine's in a spot Richard purchased. 2 mothers together forever, connected by their love for these children and their faith in his redemption. Richard brings flowers for both graves. The girls have written letters which they read aloud. "Thank you for bringing us to Grandpa," Destiny reads. "Thank you for teaching us to be brave. Thank you for loving us enough to make a plan that would save us. We miss you every day. But we're happy now. We're safe. We're loved. And we promise to make you proud." Hope adds her own letter. "Mama and Mama Catherine, I think you would like what our family looks like now. Grandpa makes us pancakes on Sundays. He helps with homework even though he's not very good at math. He reads us stories every night. He says I love you like he means it. We have friends now. We have a home. And we're not scared anymore. Thank you for finding each other. Thank you for finding us. Thank you for finding him." As they stand at the graves, Destiny asks the question she's been pondering. "Grandpa, do you think they planned everything, every single thing that happened?" Richard thinks about Catherine's elaborate scheme, her faith in his redemption, Angela's courage to fight a system designed to destroy her, two dying mothers who built a bridge across death, racism, and corruption to save their children. "Yes," he says, "I think two extraordinary women decided their children deserved better than the world was willing to give. So they built a bridge across death, across hate, across every barrier society put in their way. They built it out of love and faith and courage. And you know what the amazing thing is," Richard continues. "They built that bridge for me too. They saved me just as much as they saved you." Hope takes his hand. "You walked across it," she observes. "No," Richard says, pulling both girls close. "You carried me across." They stand together in the cemetery, a white man and two black girls who shouldn't belong together according to society's rules, but who found each other through the most powerful force in the universe, love that transcends death itself. A family born from tragedy, secrets, and impossible choices. A family that proves courage matters more than comfort, that justice is worth fighting for even when it costs everything, and that sometimes the people we save end up saving us right back. Richard looks at his granddaughters, these fierce, brilliant, beautiful children who survived more than most adults could handle, and knows with absolute certainty that every single thing he lost was worth it. Every dollar, every relationship, every comfortable lie he told himself about his place in the world, all of it was worth sacrificing for this moment, for this family, for this love. Before we close, I want to ask you something. If you found yourself in Richard's position, facing a choice between your comfortable life and doing what's right for two children who desperately needed help, what would you choose? Would you have the courage to lose everything for love? Think about it, and let me know your thoughts in the comments. If this story moved you, if it made you think about the systems of injustice that exist all around us, if it reminded you that families are built through choice and love rather than just blood, please hit that like button. Subscribe to this channel to hear more stories about courage, redemption, and the power of love to transform lives. And please share this story with someone who needs to hear it. Share it with someone who's fighting their own battle against injustice. Share it with someone who's forgotten that they have the power to change lives. Share it with someone who needs to remember that doing the right thing is always worth it, even when it costs everything. Thank you for listening to Destiny and Hope's story. Thank you for being the kind of person who cares about justice and love and courage. May you find the strength to fight for what's right in your own life, no matter the cost. May you build bridges instead of walls. May you choose love over fear, courage over comfort, and justice over convenience. And may you always remember that the family you choose can be just as powerful as the family you're born into. Take care of each other out there. The world needs more people willing to stand up, speak out, and fight for those who can't fight for themselves. Until next time,